All right, folks, welcome back to the Roswell UFO Symposium. I am your host, Mike, joined by co-host Shane, co-host Toby, and we have a special guest today. We are joined by retired Air Force veteran John Burroughs. If you're familiar with the Rendlesham, base incident or whatever you want to call it, John was one of the main experiencers, I should say, involved with that case. So we're going to have an excellent episode today. If you want to support Roswell UFO Symposium, all you have to do is click the Linktree link down below, and that will bring you to all of our social media links and video episodes, audio episodes, all that kind of wonderful stuff. Also, if you're interested, check out Mind Escape, which is my other podcast I do with Shane, and Toby is a guest sometimes on there. We had Andrew Gallimore on last night, which was a fascinating conversation. We are in for a real treat. So without further ado, welcome on the show, John. How are you?
Good. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
This is a pleasure.
Gotcha.
I've
Yeah,
been
no
I've been
doubt.
into
We were
this
excited.
case. Yeah, I've been into this case since I've been pretty much into UFOs. Now, there's been a lot of people trying to recreate what happened and figure out, oh, could it have been this? Could have been that? I remember seeing an episode of uh, something unknown with. Do you know what I'm talking about on Discovery Channel, Toby? The archaeologist guy, Josh Gates. I forget, but he did an episode where he put the Orfordness lighthouse back in commission to see if that light would reach all the way to that site on the base. It didn't. So there's been a lot of people trying to recreate things that they could have been or whatever, but you were actually there and experienced it. Why don't you give us a little bit of a background on why you don't think it could have been anything prosaic that you experienced?
Well, I'll be happy to, but let's start with this, okay? Um, Ian Ripath was the one that came out and tried to push the lighthouse theory. And he sandbagged the whole theory based off of our statements, where at one point in our statements, we talk about seeing a beacon, but that was after our first encounter and before we crossed out of the forest into the field and went towards the coast where the lighthouse was. But interesting enough, and I'm going to start by talking about the book that we put together on this. It's called Weaponization of a UAP, Rendlesham Forest Incident 40 Years Later. We uncovered evidence that the lighthouse was involved. And it goes into how it was involved in the book, but it's not like we were fooled by the beacon. But most people don't know the history of the area, but that was a high research area for the MOD, the British government, and they developed all kinds of technology, including they were originally started working on the death ray, which is lasers, which led to radar. So they actually they had all the original equipment there from the radar stuff, and they actually wired it into the lighthouse and were running EM frequencies through the lighthouse inland towards the base during our event.
It's very interesting. I actually didn't know that. And
No, a lot of people didn't know about it, but we
that's in your
uncovered the
book.
doc.
That's in your
Yes,
book.
it's in the
Okay.
book, and we've provided the evidence to show that's true. It's just not a theory. The book itself is very much cited and sourced on all where we got all these classified or declassified documents and all this stuff that was going on. And the actual original radar site at the nest was wired into the lighthouse, which was, creating EM frequencies into the forest. So it actually probably played a part in all that took place. So
Before Toby and Shane kind of jump in here, can you just give us just like a brief summary of the Rendlesham Forest incident? 'Cause I think there's a lot of people that haven't heard of it that are interested in this topic, or new ears or listeners that have come recently because of all the news and everything.
right, no problem. It was an event that happened way back in 1980. It's it'll be what 43 years in December. The incident was kept quiet, I think, for 2 or 3 years. But basically, we went on duty on a Christmas night at 2300, and evidently at the time we didn't notice, but it came out later, down the road a few years later, that actually the swing shift flight that was on had seen some strange stuff, but we didn't get the briefing. At least the people on duty, maybe our leadership did, but we didn't. As far as the shift commander, maybe that was passed on to them. But when it was about 3 o'clock in the morning, when I was riding around with my supervisor, we saw some strange lights. He actually originally saw something coming down out of the sky into the forest. Got my attention. By that point, it was in the forest. We drove off base to get a better idea before we called anything in. And when we got to the end of the road, it's where the forest was, you go left or right. I got out of the vehicle and everything seemed strange. There was like a static electricity in the air. Things didn't seem right. Drove back up to the gate and we knew we had to report it, called it in. They sent a security supervisor down because we were law enforcement. So security was sent down too to evaluate. They took a look. They saw the same stuff we were seeing, strange lights. The floor seemed to be lit up. There was some blue, green, yellow lights and a white light that was in it. So the wheels started turning to CSC. They contacted some radar sites through RAPCON, which confirmed that there was something seen on radar that disappeared into the forest. This is something that's kind of been poo-pooed or covered up a little bit because the shift commander came out at one point on his site and tried to downplay some of the stuff. But I asked him point blank, why did you authorize us to leave the base when there was not a direct threat to the base at that moment? There was something outside the gate, but it wasn't infringing on our actual perimeter. It was down the road, half a mile. I can't remember exactly, but it was down the road and into the forest. So the short answer is there was something on radar. At the point when they sent us out there, they felt like maybe something had crashed. So they didn't look at it as, like from somewhere else. They just felt because of radar contact, if something went down into the forest area. We saw something go down in the forest area. Maybe they lost an aircraft or something. So we were granted permission to go off base. We got so far where we couldn't stay in the vehicle anymore, went on foot. Seemed like it played a little bit of a cat and mouse with us for a while. And then all of a sudden we came up on top of this berm. There were three of us. And the forest kind of lit up and we all hit the ground. And that's when the stories all go a different path. But what I remember was got bright, kind of dimmed, got bright again, and it was whatever was there was gone. Now I wrote a statement and I showed like an orange type ball that was there and some blue lights and stuff that were in it. But it's different from what the security supervisor remembers and then the other guy that was with me. He actually never really described what he saw other than strange lights, but he did say that it caused us to lose consciousness for a few minutes. So we had that. Then when it left, we got up, we went to the fence line that separated the forest to the farmers area, and we could see some strange, like the farmers. They weren't actually the farmer's house. It's been proven out. It's the cottages that were down there. That we saw some lights down there. So we went over the fence, went into the field, went towards the cottages. Once we got to the cottages and then crossed the road is when we saw the beacon. And we continued forward. And at some point, we saw some strange lights in the sky, like a streak of blue lights, or a blue streak in the sky. And then we got to the coast area, and that's where that we identified the lighthouse for sure as the beacon. And we also, when we came back, we had some missing time. And what I mean by that, our watch was 40. Mine and Pennison's watch were 45 minutes slow. And it also doesn't add up how we got from where it started to where we got to on the coast and back. I went back in 18 and we tried to do it, recreate it. And there's no way we could have physically got out there and back in the time frame that it happened in. So there's another mystery to it. Well, we think we may have started to put a handle on what happened, but there's a mystery to all that. That was night one. Night two, the flight that took our place, we went on break, was on mid, saw some strange stuff. There was an interaction with the shift commander that whatever it was supposedly flew through her vehicle, shut it down. She freaked out, got relieved of duty. So she should have been there on night three. Night three is what happened with Halt with the tape that's come out and his memo that was written off of it, mostly night three. But at the same time, I got back out there again and went forward and had an interaction with whatever this was with Adrian Bustinza. and we went towards it. Bustinza said it knocked him down. Whatever it was came over the top of me, which I don't remember anything from that point when I got close to it. He said I disappeared and it completely disappeared for a while and then reappeared and it disappeared. So that's the short story of it, since we've already got an hour to discuss everything. So
Yeah, no, it's interesting. The static part kind of, have you thought about maybe like a plasma or a plasmoid or something along those lines?
well, that's the thing in the book that we go into what was taking place, which this is where we kind of crossed the line. And what I mean is, I didn't disclose, or the people that work with me on the book didn't disclose classified material, but what was taking place right outside the back gate, there was a joint American British facility, and the British side was a British telecom being run by Marconi. Then you had RAF Bowsy right there, and both of those facilities were working on that type of technology. And then you have another guy that was working through a project through his university. So I don't tick him off again, but the question is where the funding came for him to do this project. That wrote a book called Andrew Pike that was working on a known phenomenon in the area that not only was he looking at, but the military was also studying, that leads to a lot of the different technology. But what we've uncovered, and we're starting to unravel this. Have you heard of time dilation? Have you guys heard of that?
Oh yeah,
Okay.
absolutely. I talk about it all the time.
Do you know the effects it would create?
So
How
as
if
you
you
got
went into a
closer
bubble?
to it, yeah, as you got closer to
Right,
it,
but how
your
if you went
time would
into the
slow
bubble?
down.
Yes,
Yeah,
the
the
time would
gravitational
slow
thing, correct?
down.
You want to explain it
You,
for our audience?
yeah. Well, time dilation, I don't want to try to over explain it because I don't have all the research in front of me, so I get criticized for it. But basically, what I'm trying to say is, if you went into a time dilation bubble, time would slow down, and you would be in a different, I don't know the word to use exactly, but your reality would be different than the reality that's outside the bubble. So everything that you're experiencing and dealing with is different. Is affecting your mind differently and causing different things for you to remember. Once you leave the bubble, then you're back to reality and your mind's working completely differently than it was inside the bubble. So if you have trouble being close to this or in it, remembering what happened while you were in it, it explains a lot of things. And it's not like you're time traveling forward or back. You're just in the same dimension, just in a different type of, you're it's actually going slower than what's going on, which could be weaponized in itself. Because if you could take and generate that field as they're trying to lock in on something, air or on ground, it would completely alter how it was perceived, and even being able to be, the missile or whatever would actually miss it in the air or on the ground.
Yeah, and
So
if
if you could create
people,
this bubble,
I was just gonna say, if people want to look
go ahead.
into it, the time dilation thing, and there's an experiment. It's called the atomic clock experiment, where they drop two clocks that are very precise from different elevations. The more gravity there is, the more time slows down. So, for instance, the way we perceive time on Earth, if because we have a certain amount of gravity, let's say you go to an exoplanet that has far less gravity, it would be a lot. The time line would be a lot quicker. Like you would age dramatically quicker, or whatever the case may be. So, again, that's an easier way to look at it, which is kind of interesting to what you're talking about, because what is going on there? Like, is it creating a gravity bubble? I know a lot of people think a lot of this tech is anti-gravity, which that actually could make sense, because you would be separate from the normal causal timeline of reality, right?
Well, I mean, we're trying to expand on this and understand it better, but the gist of what I'm trying to say was, if you could create time dilation, you can use that in all different ways for military weaponization. Never mind the effects it would have on the people that would go into it. And one of the things that we definitely know is involved is terahertz radiation, which would also involve creating a bubble and time dilation, and also plasmas and stuff, which was clearly being worked on by the research people that were there, including the Marconi scientists. And one of the other things that's factual now that can be proven, which people then scoff at, is STI was being worked on right there. The Marconi scientists work on it. People say, no, Reagan was the first one to introduce STI. He was the first one to suggest it should be used as a weapon operational. They were working on this prior to that, and not only there, right there at that facility, those facilities where we went out into that area.
I find it interesting that you mentioned possible health effects on people near these things. Did you actually touch the craft that you saw?
No, not that I remember. The only thing I could tell you is that on the first night and the third night, both of the people I was with claimed that I was gone. It was the first night it was over me and they could see it on me and affecting me. The third night, the Bastenza said that I disappeared. So, but though I don't have any recollection of either time, nor do I remember touching it. I just remember getting close to it both times.
I know this event had a huge impact on your life then and afterwards. I know Shane's got some questions he'd like to ask about that. So Shane, let's go ahead.
I'm curious. So, as far as after effects, can you relate anything? I guess you'd say later on in life. First, let's start with this one, like PTSD, mental health, anything, medical effects that you may think may be related to the incident. I know you said you didn't touch it, and were there any witnesses that said you did get too close? And if there was a gravity well or something, I mean, something close, do you think that affected? You want to talk about that?
Well, Stinson said I went into it and disappeared. So yeah, I got inside of it. Now the interesting thing is that some of the skeptics say, well, why did other people not have the same effects that you did? Well, I can only tell you what I was told. And what I mean by told was two different people on two different nights said I had an interaction with it. Okay. Now I never saw Bastenza. He said that when he was held to the ground, it partially came over him when I disappeared. So what I could tell you is this, and then we could go into that further, is both Adrian and I have been granted disability from the United Department of Defense, stating that during that event we were injured by whatever we encountered, which if you look at Project Condign was some of the evidence that we used and some other documents that were used also in this that showed that we had something happen to us during that exposed event that related to our injuries and that we are being compensated and treated for it today. So even though they tried to cover it up at first, so
yeah. So to point out to everybody that's listening, that's one of the instances the government is kind of on paper taking this thing seriously. The other one's Cash Landrum, another one of those where there's injuries and things like that. After the incident, what did you have to deal with as far as not even just as far as everyone burying it and then you not having a way to get your benefits to deal with things?
Well, that's a long story because when it first happened, I was an airman, first base, didn't really care. I didn't understand it, didn't want to deal with it. They were taking it serious at the base. When we went in and when I did my statement, we talked to our local leadership and stuff. And at the time, I didn't know all the other stuff was taking place, other than there was some strange things that happened when I went back to work on Monday. Was that I was told that they were dealing with it. They get back to us if they needed something from us, leave it alone. I did. I went on my life. And the other thing, what I'm saying by strange stuff is I was put back on the gate on Monday night and Tuesday, and there was all kinds of activity taking place outside in the forest. Helicopters, a team came in on a C-5 from Langley, and they were working on stuff in the forest. At one point, they brought something in from the forest and brought it onto the flight line at Woodbridge. So that was going on. But as far as my injuries go, I didn't feel well afterwards. And I was looked at, and they didn't really understand it other than it could be a virus or something. They didn't really, I had some throat issues, some stuff, and they just treated it like they normally would and sent me on my way. I went back to the States, and that's when I got really sick one day, and I couldn't get back to the base when I needed to be. So I called them, and they said, go to the emergency room. When I went to the emergency room, they found this heart murmur. This doctor says, well, you have a really large heart murmur. What's the military say about it? Because you find out later I could never gotten in the military with this heart murmur. So all of a sudden I had this heart murmur. went back to the base. They immediately brought in a doctor from Wright-Patterson, which, by the way, I didn't know the ramifications of what Wright-Patterson meant at the time. He came in and evaluated me, had me immediately go to Wright-Patterson the next day, and ran all kinds of tests on me, and then said, well, you have an issue with your heart. We're going to monitor it, but it's nothing that needs to be addressed immediately now. And I went on my way. Then I started having more vision problems, which I got sent to Wolford Hall for. First thing that the doctor asked me, the specialist down there, who's a full-bird colonel involved in more details on eyes, he said, have you been exposed to radiation? And I looked at him and I said, not that I'm aware of, because again, I didn't really understand the ramifications of what took place. I just know what we saw couldn't be explained at the time. And I was told to leave it alone, and I was happy to, because it did seem to tie into possibly something from somewhere else, which at the time was taboo. You didn't want to touch that anyway. So they actually started treating me, but he tried to get me out of my orders for Korea, which, by the way, that all was happening during the time News of the World broke and the whole story broke, and everybody started chasing Rendlesham, to include CNN, which I got out of having to do an interview, even though the Pentagon got involved and wanted me to talk to the CNN reporter to make it look like it's not a cover-up. But the doctor didn't want me to go because of the issues with my eyes to Korea, but he got overrode, which never usually happens, and he didn't understand it, because they hid me away in Korea with Halt and Williams at the same time, because the story was getting hot. CNN was going to do a piece on it and everything else, and they wanted us in an area that was almost hard to reach media-wise at that point. So the piece was done, and then right after that, CNN special assignments went away, and the whole thing died. So they kept us away from a year from it ever gaining traction further than what it did. So, but fast forward to 2011, I started getting really sick. My doctor couldn't understand what was taking place with what the symptoms didn't match what they could see was the issue. And even insurance wasn't cooperating. So when he found out, wanted to know when this first happened, I told him, and he said, okay, let's get your medical records from the military to take a closer look at this. And I said, okay. So I already knew I had some issues with them before about my records and everything. So I went straight to a senator by the name of Senator Kyle's office, and I said, I need my personnel records and my medical records. They did an inquiry, and they came back, they weren't where they belonged. The next step was the aide that worked on Agent Orange and stuff through Kyle, they did a lot of veteran stuff, came back and said, your files are classified. And I know this based on other stuff I've done. You need to file disability to open up the window to what we can get from this. So she had me file disability. And what happened next was they released some stuff, but none of the stuff that happened from 79 to 82 was given. All my personnel stuff was gone from 79 to 82. So was my medical stuff. And the fact is they denied I was in based off of DD Form 214 that they produced, saying I wasn't even in. So therefore, they denied my whole claim for being injured at Rendlesham based on the fact that I couldn't have had it happen the way I said it did, because I wasn't even in the Air Force until 1982. By that time, it had gotten to Senator McCain's office, and we had enough proof to know they were completely lying, and it set off alarm bells everywhere. What are they covering up? What's going on? So from that point, then we were able to prove I was in, and then they said, "Oh, okay, well now we'll reevaluate it, withdraw what do they call it? It wasn't a referral. It was we appealed the whole thing, and when we appealed it, we had an agency get involved that could see the government was hiding documents from us, including FOIA from the senator's office, which is illegal, and they wouldn't answer our FOIA questions. But they said withdraw the appeal, and we'll go forward with your new DD 414. And so we started down that path, and then the next thing you know, it got killed completely from high up from the Justice Department. The whole thing got killed on a deal that was going to be worked out, and that's when McCain himself said, either this gets taken care of, or we're going to open an inquiry and a congressional inquiry, a Senate inquiry into Rendlesham itself. Now, then all of a sudden things started changing, but it's interesting enough, and we could touch on this later. After all this happened, the people that went through To the Stars those guys that were there, went to McCain's committee with documentation that I was aware of before it was declassified and put to McCain and his committee to try to get funding for exotic technology moving forward. So
Wow.
McCain was now read in on all this, and they were trying to move forward with exotic technology based off the fact that he's been read in because of what happened with me.
Wow. I
guys heard
I
that?
never heard
Take
that.
that. Hey, I got another question real quick. So we had talked backstage. So Toby and I just wrote an article that was about the whole Aero DoD thing. And I know Gillibrand, and they had actually mentioned after effects, health effects, whatever in there. And I know myself, Ted Rhodes started UAP Med, and we were doing that, and we were discussing it with you. Would you like to talk about we were talking about backstage? What you
We'll
guys were working
expand
on?
on it. Just tell me what
What
you
you?
want, and I'll tell you. I have no
Okay,
problems
you were
talking
talking
about
about
any.
you were talking about working with a group that's trying to get the message about the after effects, health effects, and things out.
Well, that was the whole To the Stars thing. Okay,
Oh,
first
okay, okay.
that started with Hal Puthoff and Kit Green, Christopher Green. Now, in the book, we lay out when all this took place. Green was involved. He was doing some stuff medically. He wrote a letter to the DOD/VA telling them exactly what the problem was, and he was going to testify in the lawsuit we were going to put forward, a civilian lawsuit about exposing the fact that my medical records are classified and I'm dying. And he was willing to go in on this civilian lawsuit to force the hand of the DOD to explain why they weren't cooperating in my medical care. So he came forward and supplied a letter that was later declassified on about what to look for. They immediately recognized what was going on, and I was treated for it immediately, and I had heart surgery. But the interesting thing was they wanted my DNA, which, by the way, I wouldn't give it to them. But when they did the surgery, they not only got the DNA they wanted through blood, but they got tissue also. So that's another whole aspect. But when all this started happening, I then got my settlement, came rather quickly after my surgery, and I got my settlement for all this. But my lawyer, Pat Frascogna, and I were ready to kill this whole thing and just say, fine. And we got a kind of a warning shot from the DOD saying, this case is closed. We're taking responsibility for your injuries. We're going to treat you. We're not going to tell you what it is or what's going on, other than we're going to treat you for this now. But we can't deny that, based on we're acknowledging your injuries, that it took place at Rendlesham, but we're not going to tell you what it was. And that we're not going to answer any more of your FOIA questions or anything else. It's a dead issue, right? So that's kind of a veil warning, let it go. So we were prepared just to announce to the world, because this has been made a big deal. Yeah, we got a settlement. And the press release was written as de facto admissions by the United States government UAPs are real, which is basically what they did through the settlement, through myself and then Adrian Bustinza. But then Christopher Green went out on a website called Above Top Secret and laid out a 3-paragraph summary of what exactly was going on with all this, which we didn't expect. Okay, and that's in the book, and that opened up another whole can of worms. Never mind then the analysis of our DNA and what went on with all that, backtracking where our heritage comes from and everything else. So yeah, there's a big thing going on with all this that the DOD is actually working on, trying to figure all this out, and never mind the weaponization that they're doing with UAPs themselves. And I've always said this recently because I've been asked, what is exactly a UAP? We're trying to narrow in closer and closer on what it is. And then people argue with this, what was being seen way back. And sure it was. And matter of fact, we're starting a new show on the UNX network tonight where we're going to start building a history of what was seen in the past going forward and how the government got involved in all this and is trying to weaponize it in modern technology today. But in actual reality is that, yeah, it happened before, and now it's getting harder and harder to distinguish between what is from whatever a UAP actually is. As Bigelow said, they're here and they're among us, and exactly how far we've advanced and what are we seeing as our stuff, or from what a UAP is, or the phenomena is. Never mind the fact that I'm not a big fan of Nick Pope in certain ways, especially recently, some of the stuff that's gone on. But his one statement was this: we may not have an extraterrestrial aircraft in the hangar, but we may have terrestrial aircraft being using ET technology.
I've got a question in regards to the health stuff. Is
Yeah.
it possible, do you think, that that could have been some sort of advanced tech, like Shane mentioned Cash Landrum too, that maybe they're trying to replicate something otherworldly, and through that process they're using different fuels or exotic materials to try and accomplish this, and maybe they weren't aware of the effects, or maybe something went wrong in some of these things, or something along those lines?
Well, I can expand on this. Chuck Nicaro became very good friends with from CNN stated this: a lot of stuff that happens in the weapons world comes from something that completely unrelated to what they were working on. Like he used the example of radar came from the death ray, but they had no idea radar was there until they worked on the death ray and they developed this. So yes, do I think Cash Landrum and Bentwaters are related? Probably not. And I say this only because what we encountered, other than one person's statement, which no one else corroborated with seeing it the way they did, is the fact that we encountered strange lights and strange things that caused effects to us, obviously injured us, and everything else. Where Cash Landrum was reported as something flying under a helicopter, that the radiation effects were different on them than they were on us. Ours was terahertz, theirs was more a different type of radiation. And it happened within a 48-hour period, which is kind of hard to believe that, that would get from there to there. And why would they be flying something if they recovered from Rendlesham by a helicopter when they could just bring it into the base that they wanted it at by an aircraft? So, not saying that Cash Landrum isn't real or is important to all this. I just don't think they intermix. And the fact is that we can prove that the technology they were working on outside the gate at Woodbridge. And I have no idea what the Cash Landrum stuff was, or where it came from, or what exactly how it played into everything. But there's a lot of evidence to support what something strange was going on. Not only that, but they were studying a phenomenon that's still there to this day in the
Yeah,
forest.
I got one more question. So, as far as experiencers, people who do suffer from whatever after effects, right? Because a lot of people always assume that whatever this is shooting death rays. No, it could be by chance something's going on. You're too close, too near. Uh, PTSD from the incident. What do you think the government should do if they're starting to take this seriously? Because I know Gillibrand had mentioned health effects. To, I guess, should they stand up some kind of a? And I know this sounds weird, like a social security type thing to deal with this kind of, because there's nothing ready. Because that's one of the reasons we were doing UAP Med. There's not enough doctors and stuff to even take you seriously.
Well, if you notice, if you go back and read the statement made by Dr. Green, he stated that there's documentation to support this. It's just not been looked at very closely at this point when he wrote this, according to him, that supports the facts and the injuries that would take place. But he was grateful that the government stepped up and some of his colleagues stepped up to make this happen with me. But there is stuff there, but unfortunately, you can't say that it's not really all there. It's just not necessarily in the white world. That was the problem my doctor was having in the first place, understanding this. But as soon as Green got in the middle of it and got to the DOD with what they needed to look at, they knew exactly what they were dealing with. If you're saying military, it would definitely be the VA, which has exactly stepped up for Adrian Bristenza and I, through a lot of help from a lot of good people. The injuries from the civilians, I don't know, other than you could say if they can't work anymore, I guess Social Security, disability, and Medicaid would come into play on this. Do you know what I mean? That would be a short-term solution. But then you also could have a lawsuit, because just look at what what they've done now with Camp Lejeune and the water situation. If civilians are being exposed to something, now the fine line is it us or something else? And then if it's both, then how do you actually go forward with any of this when you don't have enough documentation to do it, overall? But in my case, the documentation we got some help from a government guy, and some other stuff moved it forward enough that the government acknowledged we were injured in Rendlesham Forest, but they still haven't admitted to what it was.
I think the fact that they classified your medical records kind of speaks volumes on that point. It's obviously something they didn't want getting out.
Well, yeah, but that's the interesting thing too, that this taboo by a lot of people to argue this, but this is a fact. Okay. If you're involved in something that's classified, I have no more right to my records or access to them once it's deemed national security. They always say I have a right to my records. I don't if it's classified, and they're classified. So people say, well, why just can't you get them? Because they're classified. And this is real. There's a classified record section that we found that existed. We found documentation to support that. And they wouldn't answer directly if my records were classified, other than the aide from Senator Kyle's office. I did a presentation, and I've got her letter highlighted in that saying your records are classified. And she herself and the senior aide, there was Cheryl Bennett was working on this, doing most of the work, but there was an aide that was a senior aide that ran the Phoenix office. Both her and Kyle's aide said, "You've been obviously injured. It definitely involved the military. It definitely involved Rendlesham, but we can tell you right now, you're not going to get any answers on what injured you. We know that for a fact. You're never going to know what it was, and you're never going to get access to your records at this point. It's all classified."
It's crazy that everything that you've had to go through, but even just normal veterans that come back just to get mental health or deal with PTSD or anxiety or depression, it's insane to me that we'll send all these people with the most expensive technology and weapons money can buy, and then we can't even take care of them when they come home. It's sad and disappointing. And
Well, the issue is that I talked to Senator McCain about this directly. That I am one that I'm not going to get into a debate on what is national security or what isn't. But if it's going to be deemed national security, there needs to be some area where this stuff can be handled by people with clearances that can make a determination that can get us treated. And if the point is that where you actually, if it goes to that level and you can't talk about it, that's a whole different avenue. But in my case, I already started talking about it because I wasn't getting anywhere. So it shouldn't even have to happen necessarily. If you have something go on, they should be able to grab you, take you, treat you, and take care of you. And maybe you are locked down by non-disclosure. But I don't think most people would argue with that overall, as long as they're healthy and being able to deal with it. But the sad thing is because it's not really there, then they leave you hanging to the point where you have to scream from the highest mountain. And in my case, it worked. But a lot of people's doesn't. But there was just enough stuff out there, never mind the people that got involved, including Senator McCain, that actually pushed the envelope forward, where most people don't have that ability to do that. So I was blessed by that. I can say that honestly.
absolutely. Just to pivot a little bit from the medical stuff, every once in a while you'll see an article trying to explain away the incident. For a while it was somebody saying that the U.S. was playing games on, because there's two bases. There's the U.S. base right there, and then you have the RAF or the British base there as well.
No. Let me clarify that.
Okay, clarify.
There were RAF Bentwaters and Woodbridge. There were
Okay.
joint base that was on British soil being operated by the American government with a British liaison on it.
Okay.
But we were running the bases. And the thing is that people, and I'm not bringing in the nuclear aspect as far as what or wasn't there, but what I
Right.
could tell you is the people that yell and scream and say nuclear weapons couldn't be in England don't understand the NATO treaty. Under NATO, these bases were being operated under NATO, which gave them a whole different aspect of what they could and couldn't do over if it was just an American operation on British soil. So the bases were under NATO command. We went through a NATO TACA valve I think it was 2 years, maybe it was a year. I don't remember, it's so long ago. But so all this stuff that was taking place fell under NATO, which was a whole different avenue than it was just an American base on British soil.
Yeah.
But it was our basis.
But I was just mentioning, though, there was articles saying that the U.S., this was the British response to the U.S. playing tricks on them, or I don't know. Have you heard that? Is like trying to like
there was an article that came out that said the SAS was playing jokes. They were out there doing an op. Yeah. No, I've
Well, how would
saw
that
it.
explain your medical? I was just curious if what you thought about that, and why would they try and explain away something so stupid when there's
Because they're trying to divert the attention. The best that we can come together, and still working on this to be able to prove it 100%, is that the area itself, not the base, not Woodbridge, not Bentwaters, but outside the back gate and the facilities that were there, we're working on high-end technology that's being integrated still to this day. And at that point in time, it was maybe stuff that was theoretical that they were trying to look at, R&D and whatever else, never mind to study this phenomenon, but is all the stuff that's going to move forward with our modern technology. So they definitely would not want people to really look that hard, even though it's there, with different documentaries have shown what they were working on back in those areas and what the British government was working on. Never mind their radar capabilities and the fact that they had. I don't know today. I can't speak today as of right now if their radars are still better than ours. But their radar technology in 1980 was better than ours because we were testing all our stealth technology against their radars, not against American radars at
Yeah, I
the
mean,
time.
apparently ours isn't great, right? Because we just updated ours and we're finding a bunch of balloons and random
Well,
stuff.
I'm glad you brought that up because I want to throw something into Toby on this, right?
Okay.
It's interesting, right? Let's think about this for a minute, Toby. Roswell happens in 1947, right? Jesse Marcel, right, comes out and says it was something from somewhere else. The next day, he gets attacked for it. They try to blame it on weather balloons. Fast forward to today. NORAD comes out and says, the commander says, well, we can't rule out ET yet. The next day, they have a Roswell Phi Symington moment when they come up on the podium and make before Kirby does his interview and laughs and says, the girl says, "Oh no, it's not ET. Don't even go there." Blah blah. The press acts nervously, and they make fun of ET, which is what Symington did to kill the whole the Phoenix Light story. So they do all that, but now it's interesting. The press is pushing back and saying, "Wait a minute, don't try to shun us or mock us when we want to ask the ET question when you brought it up in the first place, and you're not willing to tell us what you actually brought down or what it is, and you claim you don't know for sure." So it's changed a little bit. But the question is, how long will this stay in the news cycle enough to force some more issues going forward? But we just basically had Roswell too, with the fact that the NORAD commander said we can't rule out ET, and then they turned around and handled it about the same way they did Roswell.
Well, here's where things get interesting. On Sunday, before NORAD gave the Pentagon press briefing, I received an email from them inviting me to be part of that news conference.
Ooh,
The Roswell
that
Daily
is.
Record, I've never spoken to anybody from the Pentagon in my life, right? So
Yeah.
I'm in there with all these major news networks, and I'm the only small news source. So why is the UFO newspaper getting invited in there? And then the guy from NORAD says, I'm not going to rule out extraterrestrials. I mean, coincidence, maybe, but it's.
No different than if you go forward with the next part of the military people exposed to this, maybe I don't know, maybe they want that. I don't know, but it's definitely your newspaper could have a pretty good story that would come out on injuries from UAPs from military personnel. So,
Yeah,
and
like
in my
yesterday.
case, I'm sorry. Go ahead. Go ahead.
What? And then yesterday, I get a
More
press release from Senator Gillibrand's office. So I don't know.
so like Toby just did that UAP Med article, but we're just talking about doing a more in-depth article on After Effects, and I'm totally cool with that. If Toby, as he said, yeah, might get
Yeah, it's
fired,
on
but
military personnel,
yeah,
and
Yeah. Well, the
we know
interesting
there's
thing, and
been
I'm
plenty of exposures.
but I'm
I would
not
love to.
downplaying because Green said that there was 100 people that have had issues with UAPs and injuries, including most people didn't ever catch this, but we got verification of it on our Phenomena Radio show we used to do, because when they were working at Skinwalker, they brought in special forces through the money that was provided by the Reed, and they had an encounter with whatever was there, and this whatever was there followed them back to their base, and some of them had some exposure and injuries from this. So the fact of the matter is, That's not 100% verifiable yet either, but I can clearly prove to the world that both Adrian and I got our settlement based off of what happened at Bentwaters. I can't prove to the world it was alien, but we've got a lot of documentation to show that they've accepted the fact that our injuries came from a UAP encounter.
Let me get your
Whatever.
take on um, Dr. Gary Nolan was given some brain scans by the government, to examine, and these were of people that had close contact with UAP.
Right.
He
I was
found
part of
it.
the, well, they wanted me in that study, but they couldn't use that part of it with me because I have a pacemaker for my injuries. So it was going to be hard to justify, even though my pacemaker may have accepted having that type of, an MRI, not, what is it, an MRI done, it might affect my pacemaker. So I didn't get part of that part of it. But yeah, they're looking at the mine to see if there was injuries. I don't know how they would ever prove that the injuries happened from the encounter of the UAP, because unless they had a scan prior to the encounter, which I don't know if they do or not, but they were looking at the effects of the mine for people that were encountered UAPs. And they also were looking, which I'm involved in that study, the study of the effects on the DNA once you were exposed to UAPs.
Talk about that a little bit.
Sure. What do you want to know?
What did it involve? Was there a large group of you? And was there, I'm guessing it was top secret. I'm wondering if we could figure out a way to get anything for it or anything out of there.
Well, I can tell you this, okay? The project was funded, Hal Puthoff, and Gary Nolan and Kit Green were the spearhead of the project. I don't know where they sent the data to. I know where my other DNA stuff went to. It went to a Pennsylvania lab, which I have all the reports on that. But they were looking at 100 people to analyze the DNA from that they confirmed. I'm not knowing how they confirmed all these 100 people, but they said there was a minimum of 100 people that they have confirmed had UAP encounters, and that they didn't really clarify 100% on what they were looking for other than there were markers. And what I do find interesting was when Green first met with me, he came to Sedona, he brought my lawyer in and his wife, and they immediately wanted my DNA, which I declined. They flew in the next day while Green was just left, and they brought him in anyway. They brought in Nolan and Colin Kelleher. They flew Nolan into Vegas. They drove down to Vegas to meet with me in Flagstaff to try and get my DNA, which I didn't give to him at the time. But then moving forward, I got they got the DOD and the VA to give me the treatment I needed to keep me alive. And that's when I found out that that's how they got my original DNA. So they did get my DNA for the study through that. And they also got tissue, which is even better than just the blood sample. And then they did a follow-up DNA sample, which was different than that. They just took saliva to analyze my son and mine's heritage and his mother's heritage to see where that went compared to what the other stuff that they were working on.
Sounds
Okay.
like extraterrestrial Jurassic Park. They're looking to build aliens through DNA.
Guys, I could give you an insight, just a hypothesis right now on, without going down the ET card, because again, until we establish what the makeup of the UAP is and the effects it can have 100%, even though you look at Valet's work and he lays out a pretty good scenario what it could be and what we're dealing with. You have Andrew Pike's work, that what they were working on and trying to understand at Rendlesham Forest, and some of the weaponization programs that they're working on right now. But I don't totally understand. Is it always been here? Is it from somewhere else that came here? What exactly this phenomenon is? But it's here. Bigelow made very clear to the world on 60 Minutes that there's something here and we're dealing with it. But it's not necessarily what Green said in Mirage Man when he said the public's been educated one way, but that's not what really is going on. And once the public gets a better grasp of what's going on, it's not like the aliens are coming here to eat us or destroy us like all the TV shows and books have implied. It's a totally different concept on what we're dealing with. It's not from Zeta Reticuli, maybe, or anything like that, but there is something here and we're dealing with it. So, to be honest with you, that's what we're digging into in our show that we're working on and trying to do a documentary at the end of this. But there is something here. It's definitely interacting with civilian and military people. It's definitely having an effect. Now, the big question is early on, and I made that clear in the book that I co-authored with some people, was I'm not sold that it's here to hurt us. It would just be like anything else. It's just like when Columbus came over to America and the natives were exposed to diseases and stuff they've never had before, and it hurt them pretty bad, early on until they build up immunity. So whatever we're dealing with may not be here to hurt us. It just may be our bodies can't completely deal with it. But here's the interesting concept. They're looking at consciousness for sure. And think of the ramifications if they could figure out how to put consciousness in weapons, how it would modernize what modern technology as far as weaponization. If you could control everything with the consciousness in it and not have to control it from the ground or a pilot itself, you wouldn't have to risk a person. You could just use consciousness to control everything.
Do you think we're close on that front? Because, I mean, philosophically, we have the hard problem of consciousness where, I mean, maybe the military has some sort of knowledge that's more clandestine than what's out there. But you talk to any I was just talking with a neuroscientist last night. The idea that we're even close to cracking consciousness is like we're really far off in terms of the public sphere. So I was just curious if you think that we have
Well,
some sort of
that's an interesting concept, but here's my point. I can't tell you how close we are. I believe we're working on it. We've got enough proof to show that. What I could tell you is there's a difference between the white world and the dark world. The white world, if he's not working with the dark world at all, he'd have no clue how far we've come. But my guess would be we're probably farther along than it's being acknowledged, but they probably have a hard time controlling it. How do you control consciousness in weapons and not have it turn on us is, I guess, one of the things that you'd have to wonder about. Because if these weapons can self-teach themselves, what's to say that the parameters that are put in there, they don't turn around and say, well, wait a minute, what we're supposed to defend from is exactly what you're trying to do anyway. I don't know. But I would say we're farther along than the white world knows. But how far that is, I'm not sure. But it's clear that that's part of it. Never mind what is exactly a plasma. And the Condyne says it's intelligent. It controls things, and it can also be weaponized. So we're trying to tie all this together, but we're trying to stay clear of identifying that exactly what it is until we come up with a pretty good answer to it based off of documentations and science. But we're also trying to stay away from the old theory of ET, which is exactly what's happened now. We've got it's all getting combobulated together with what is a UAP, what is ET, what does a UFO mean? Does a UFO mean it's ET, or is it just something we don't know what it is? And then the DOD, which I caught in the briefing that he gave, he said that the president's being briefed daily now on UAPs. Well, that's a big deal for the president to receive a daily briefing on UAPs. And it just came out this afternoon that he now is demanded to be briefed on exactly what we hold technology-wise with drones and everything else. So where is this going? It's a great time to say we're maybe going to a new cusp. And Toby, the fact that you just told me they wanted you on that briefing is a big deal, because what do they want you to write about? Do they want you to be the lead on this? Isn't that ironic that the very newspaper that broke the initial story about something from somewhere else may have crashed at Roswell has been invited to talk about exactly what's going on?
And especially since he's a Cowboys fan, I mean, it's just we're in a whole new phase here. I don't know.
They went for the one with the lowest IQ.
No,
Yeah,
no.
no.
There's a symbolic. It's symbolic that why not let you guys break the story or have a part of the story, because you were the one.
Well,
If you trace this back, you were the first newspaper to ever break something may have actually crashed that's not from this world. It's a big deal.
Yeah,
Exactly what
definitely.
I said to him. I said, "Do you realize how big of a thing this?" I mean, subconsciously, someone sees Roswell Daily Record in their brain. They're like, "Okay, this is exactly what you had said." And then, like I said, I'm an experiencer, and through a series of weird ass synchronicities, these are my best friends. I'm here with you right now. I writing articles with him. We just did that last one together, and we're able to talk about veterans, after effects, all that stuff. And Toby's, yeah, I don't
Right.
know.
And
It
you
does
got
not
to
make
think
any
of it this
sense.
another way. Basically, your story will have to get picked up by writers, AP, and all that. But don't you think it may have a better chance of being picked up if the original newspaper now has
Oh
something that
yeah,
might pertain to what's going on today?
yeah.
So, yeah,
With the
this
time
is
You
and
heard
effort
it
very
it
here,
takes, maybe.
interesting.
folks. Look out for these
This
papers.
is
Look.
very interesting, Toby. This is very interesting, and it could go somewhere. I don't know where, and I'm not saying this is disclosure, but this is something that goes along the lines that maybe the government wants some more out. And I always call it confirmation, not disclosure, because that was what Bigelow had introduced before all this started happening. Was we need to go to a level of the republic. The public understands something's going on, but we don't need to go into the nuts and bolts of it directly. So there you go, Toby. Let's do this. This could be
Listen,
fun.
John, I know you wanted to keep
Absolutely.
it around an hour. I have one more
Yeah.
question, and then I'll let Shane and Toby ask you anything else they've got
Okay.
ready to go. But my question is, so the Charles Halt stuff that happened the 2 days after, there's different accounts. I've read all the different accounts of everything that happened. Do you think that he saw what you saw? Do you think he saw something else? Do you think there was just weirdness in the air and maybe people were just seeing weird shit at that point? Or like, what do you think was happening? Because I know that they also took like radiation readings from those marks on the ground and stuff like that. Do you think he saw what you saw, or do you think it was something else?
Well, I can tell you this. When I met up with him, the stuff was still going on in the sky. So we both saw that together. Now, that part I didn't see on night one, but I did see the blue lights more at, the forest level. So, and then whatever came down out of the sky or from the distance into the forest in front of us, and we went forward, was somewhat like what we saw from a distance on night one. So he clearly saw what we saw from a distance on night one, and we both saw those those blue lights. Now, interesting enough, in the book, and it's pretty much, I'm pretty sure that's what it was. That probably was plasmas, whether they were we created them or we created them off the phenomena that were being controlled by radar waves and also by lasers. Because the white light would explain the lasers, but there's also a capability of lasers that can be stealth, where you can have a frequency going up that you don't even see, which can also be doing that. But radar signatures will affect these plasmas. So that's part of it. So yeah, we saw some of the same stuff from night 1 and 3. Okay, and interesting enough, in the book, there's a chapter on there by the name of an engineer by the name of Win Keach, and he did an investigation on Rendlesham, and he laid out a synopsis of what was going on, including the spy satellite that we probably brought down during that whole event, that was brought down, that was Russian. And Halt saw the report and agreed with it. He said he can't discredit the report. It's pretty close to what went on. So there was all kinds of things going on out there. But yes, both of us saw some of the same stuff from night 1 and 3. So
Okay,
Okay.
cool. That's what I was
My
wondering. Thank you.
my
Toby,
question
Shane?
is, back in 2021, let me see if I'm looking at the article. May 5th, 2021, The Sun, I believe it was, released black and white photos from a poacher that claimed he was there that night. Have you seen those pictures?
yeah,
And
I
do you have
saw the
comments on them?
article. I saw the article and stuff. And the problem with it is that without him being able to prove that he was there, and the main the the what do they call it, the negatives and stuff, it's something that I don't know. I don't know. I remember some people went after it, but everybody goes after anything like that. So I don't really know. But for me to take it real, I'd have to have proof that he was there at the time and could show it, and that the negatives from the pictures, then I would say that may mean more than just there it was. Because they've done all kinds of things. They've even said it was manure, what some guy lit off a manure truck one night. So who knows? I mean,
It was
it could
Shane.
be,
He's
it
full
could
of
not be.
shit.
I don't know. Okay. All right, Shane, what do you got for me?
Wrong, John. Hey, I was just going to say, so in your opinion, as far as people, experiencers, people who do take this topic seriously that aren't in the government, what can they do to help the conversation about after effects and, with their doctors, with these organizations or whatever's going on? I was just curious.
Well, the only hope they have is if the government actually reveals some stuff, because the regular doctor's not going to have a lot of access to this. You know what I mean? And in fact, my case is being handled by certain doctors in the VA. I can't. A civilian doctor is not allowed to do an echo on me or evaluate my heart at all overall. It all has to be done through the VA. So, and these are doctors that have to be read in to whatever they're being told about what went on. So it's really not, it's hard right now for anybody that has had something happen to them, other than just the fact that I don't want to try to say my story and what I'm writing about and putting out is 100% right, but I think we're closer because I've experienced this, and we are looking at it from a scientific military aspect, is probably closer to what's really going on than anything else. And I'm not downplaying Jacques Vallée. He's a guy that's done a lot of work. He's way out in front of all of this. So he's something you could look into some of his work and everything else. Nolan's talking about some of this, which, he's trying to explain some of this and expand on this. So you can do some more research and look at all this. But until it gets out there, it's going to be really hard for most people to understand it 100%. And I will tell you this, part of Adrian Bustin's settlement had to do with PTSD from all this. But the interesting part was when all the documentation was presented to the government, they knew exactly how to treat him. They knew exactly that it was real, that he was compromised, he had PTSD from this, and they've been treating him for it since. So it would be nice that at least, it's a tough thing because if they admit to injuries like to the civilian world and all that, then the lawyers get involved and everything else. So it's a mess. It's a toxic mess. And it's hard, but keep following you guys, follow some of the science that's going on. We're going to try to do our best to put some of this out to make it better understood, but maybe we're moving forward, maybe we're not. But again, I think the most exciting thing I learned out of this is, Toby, you guys are going to be read in on being allowed to be part of this. They wouldn't have invited you otherwise. You just have to seize the moment.
I'm trying to, definitely trying to. Yeah, but we're definitely gonna have to do this again because you're always super interesting to talk to. Like I said, I think we
Thank you, John.
first met in person in
Yeah.
2017.
Well, it was
We were
ever
hanging
that
out at,
anniversary. Yeah, I came down with Race Hobbs for your, was it 70th anniversary, was it? Or
yeah, it was one of those, but we were all just
yeah,
hanging
it
out
was
at
the big
Applebee's,
one.
and then
It was the big, yeah, it was the big one,
it
the
was the
big,
70th then probably.
yeah, okay. Okay.
So we were all hanging out
So,
at Applebee's, and I actually got some time alone with John, me and my wife, and he told us, his what actually happened to him, and ever since then, I was like, man, we ever start a podcast, this is a guy that has to come on it, and here we are.
and I can say
So
this, and again, it sounds like I'm pushing my product, but weaponization of a UAP has a lot of good stuff in there. If somebody wants to look at the other angle, of one of the angle is, you got the Zeta Reticuli angle, flying saucers, they're invading us, they're going to eat us, attack us, destroy us. Then we've taken that to exactly probably a lot of what maybe is going on, not only involving the military and what they're trying to glean from all this and moving forward from the past to the present to the future, and then and some of the effects it would have, plus this documentary type things that we're working on, plus we're going to do an update to the book, and we're also going to do a documentary off the updates and what we're doing right now. We're trying, guys. I mean, we don't have all the answers either. Only the black dark secret world holds all the answers.
Do you have any names or dates of release for any
Well,
of the
real quick, Mike, you know
books?
what we forgot to talk about?
Hmm.
What do you think about
What?
downloads?
What do we need to talk about?
Like
What do you
downloads, let's
mean, a
say
download from an alien or
encounters with the
something?
craft, like information received or data, perhaps.
Okay,
Do you
what
think
I can
that's a
tell
thing?
you, this is all I can tell you right. I can tell you this. This is all I can tell you right now, not because I'm trying to avoid the question, but when this particular document was given to me to give to the DOD and the VA, Chuck Takara, who was working with Andy Marshall, if you Google who he is, he was the guru. He was called Yoda. He had been involved in exotic technology going way back several administrations. He groomed a lot of the Secretary of Defenses prior to, Bush and stuff. So he was the cutting edge of exotic technology and where we were going in the future. He worked with him, and when I asked him a question, it was just, hey, I'm trying to understand why this just happened the way it did, and you have access into the government and technology. What does this mean? He went ballistic and said, you shouldn't know any of this. He said, this is classified stuff that shouldn't be even talked about. Where did you get it from? And we may need to contact the FBI about this stuff. And I calmed him down, and we were able to work it out with the person that gave it to me and everything else, who happened to know Andy Marshall anyway. But ultimately, one of the things he said was terahertz explains a lot of things, including what you brought up. It could explain some kind of a communications effect
So maybe like
on how it
altered
could.
altered states allow some sort of window or into this information or able to receive
The
information.
frequency could relate to that type of a download where you could get it with nonverbal, is what I'm trying to say. Now,
Okay.
we're going to expand on that in this stuff we're working on, and including time dilation. But my point being is it possible, according to Chuck DeCaro and according to the terahertz stuff we're looking into? Sure, it's possible. But do we totally understand it? No. We're going to need somebody, a physicist or somebody else, to better explain it and stuff. But we're working at that end. But is it possible? Yeah, it's possible. And is it possible to be affected by this? Sure. If you went into a time dilation bubble or that, it would jumble your mind because you're in a different area and then come back to the reality. So that would cause issues. Never mind the fact that trying to understand in your mind what you saw, what you dealt with. You know what I mean? Forget about the heart injuries and stuff, which it can cause also. It would just cause an effect on your mind that you dealt with something that's not, can't even explain, and there's not a lot of places to go to in the first place to even understand it. You know what I mean? So yes, it's possible, Shane. It is possible, and we're going to try to expand on it.
Thank you for being so candid. And I really need to
Yeah.
say thank you for your service and putting up with the bullshit to try to get, what every veteran should have anyway. So I appreciate that,
Well,
sir.
I'm on a quest. My quest is, I'm kind of bored with everybody else, and I'm not cutting them down. I'm just saying I have an insight that most don't. I've dealt with all these people one on one. I've met them all face to face. I've talked to physicists. I've talked to Hal Puthoff face to face, Kit Green, Gary Nolan, and all that. And I'm trying to understand it. And I kind of look at me like you right now. Um, Roswell was invited to the party, and I've been invited to the party. And the thing is that it's up to us to do the right thing, and try to get the best information we can based on what we know out to give the public a chance to digest it. You understand what I mean? And I still want to understand better what happened to me. I'm still affected by it. Never mind the health issues. I totally like to understand what the heck is really going on. What
Dude,
is
I
really
love
going
I
on?
love that philosophy that you had this crazy experience and you're just not going to wait for anybody else to explain it to you, or you're going to figure it out yourself. And I think that that's how it should
Well,
be.
I can tell you this, it's more up to us than it is our government. I think most of us can agree the government's not very truthful, especially when it comes to secrets. So the only way we can help people and educate people is to put the rubber to the road and start working on stuff and not be distracted by stuff that's a distraction.
100% agree with that. And thank you so much. As Toby mentioned, you are a wealth of knowledge. We'd love to have you back on. There's like a million other questions I probably could have asked myself too.
Okay.
Yeah, I know Shane really appreciated all the UAP medical issue stuff, and Toby and him are working on the articles, and they just released a couple articles. So check out Toby at RDR Incident on Twitter for all of the latest updates, and also check out Shane at Old Vet Symposium on Twitter. And John, is there anything you would like to plug before we get out of here?
Just if you want, get the weaponization book. I hope it helps. And follow our series on the UNX network. It'll be on YouTube too after the fact. That we're going to try to deep dive into what this means from the beginning to modern, present day. We're going to do our best and try to tie up some of this together to get a better understanding, not only for the general public, but for me and the other people I'm working with, because we have an interest in trying to get as best as we can what we think is what's really going on, not what the government wants you to believe is going on.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
What time are you on tonight?
7 to 9 Central, 8 to 10 Eastern.
Okay.
So tune in, everybody. Shane, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, I just want to say one more thing. Again, thank you for being here. And the reason I say that, because the whole After Effects thing is just now being discussed, and there's really not a lot of places you can go. And so UAP Med's one of the things I do, and I'm glad the stuff you talked about just blows my mind. So if you're out there and you want to help, here's what I'm going to do. I will give as a giveaway, hashtag UAP Med, find them, add them on Twitter, whatever. Any information you find on After Effects and like medical journals, books, things like, I've been finding all kinds of stuff. I actually, on my Twitter, if you go look, there's a thread right now. It's got like 20 books where they mention different After Effects. Actually, one of your books, so go check it out. And if you can find more information, put it in there. Hashtag UAP Med. And at the very least, it gives us something to read, work on in articles and things like that. So I appreciate it, guys. And check out the Roswell Daily Record, my family, and this article we just put out, me and Toby's first. So thank you for being here, John.
Thank you.
Yeah, so that's it. Thank you so much again. Again, we will have him back on in the future to further these conversations. If you would like to support the Roswell UFO Symposium, all you have to do is click the Linktree link down below. We're on all the social media platforms. And yeah, we have video episodes on Spotify, which a lot of people don't have. So if you're watching on YouTube, please check us out on Spotify and Apple Podcast. And if you're listening on Apple Podcast and Spotify, please subscribe and like our YouTube channel, as we do most of our episodes live on there. So, and yeah, if you want to check out Mind Escape, which is the other podcast I do with Shane, and sometimes Toby comes on there. It is a philosophy podcast dedicated to exploring the mysteries of life. And again, follow Shane, follow Toby. They've got a lot of stuff in the works with the UFO, UAP topic and articles and all sorts of information.
We'll be at AlienCon too, doing some live coverage.
Be at AlienCon. Also, as we leave here, I'm going to play the trailer for our documentary that premieres at the Roswell UFO Expo, which runs March 10th through 12th. You can buy your tickets right now at ufoexpo.com. Really looking forward to that. I am a speaker, and we're going to be doing stuff with this Symposium podcast there, as well as Toby's festival, which is a film festival which runs from the end of May. I think it's the last weekend in May. Is it? It's the last day in May to June 2nd, I believe. Correct, Toby?
No, it's June 30th.
Oh, June 30th.
2nd.
I'm sorry. June and July. I got that mixed up. So
The
yes,
UFO Festival. Yeah.
please check that out as well. I'm trying to think if there's anything else. I think that's it. But again, all the links are down below to follow everything and subscribe and all that wonderful jazz. But I'm going to play the trailer for the documentary, which is called As Within, So Without, From UFOs to DMT. And that's it. We love everybody. Stay safe out there, and we'll catch you next time. Peace.
Is it real or is it not? That's what you're asking me.
I still, to this day, can't find any rational explanation for what I saw.
Extremely intelligent, apparently highly advanced, hyper-technological being.
I think that we just don't look at the perception of reality in the right way yet.
It got very close to the point that I could see just one big light, and then it stopped, and then it shot up in the sky.
You know you're not dreaming, but you wonder how real any of it really is.
It dawned on me, it was real. This took place, but then I still didn't do anything with it. Never said anything to anybody.
There is some mind-altering aspect to these UFO encounters. A lot of people get a sense of missing time.
I noticed that these three stars were kind of in a formation. It was a triangular formation.
Condensed into entities or beings that you interact with who are sentient.
The chemicals which are going into our brain are making the unconscious archetypes come alive.
How things evolve from pure energy to matter.
Definitely was kind of a paradigm shifting moment.
And as we continue to evolve in our own consciousness, we will perceive of new modes of interpretation, but that may be dependent upon how this supposed phenomenon reveals itself to us.
I'm not sure why we discredit the human experience when it's not in alignment with our current belief system.
It's important to consider that, one, we don't really understand what our minds do under the influence of psychedelics.
They all attest to the reality of some other realm. You call it the paranormal, doesn't matter what you call it, spiritual realm, supernatural, metaphysical, doesn't matter.
The fact that we're essentially vibrating energy in a sense, and that when this experience is over, that particular energy transforms and doesn't die because it can't die, fills me with a lot of comfort that there is something else after this so-called here and now.
They show you how much of your reality is subjective and fragile and capable of being influenced by a psychedelic drug.
Coming from a scientific background, you come up with explanations that range from geomagnetic to atmospheric to something that's physical in nature.
There's a lot more out there that we don't know than we do know.
So the entire system, the human body, is effectively a stimulation response machine.
I think something's here. I don't know what it is. I don't know where it's from. It could be extraterrestrials.
Until it made a full rotation and then it just hit an insane speed and just shot up straight into the atmosphere.
I think that there's compelling evidence that psychedelics have played a significant role in human evolution over a long period of time.
That our view of reality, the reality that we experience on a day-to-day basis, seems to be this very, very thin slice of something far larger and far more diverse. For reasons that we're
never communicated
clear about.
Never said anything.
But I don't seem to have the message.
As within, so without. From UFOs to DMT.